Welcome to the Monday Monologue. And sorry the content's been a little slow, and I missed last week's Monday Monologue. Had a pretty bad chest cold, and it got to the point where I couldn't talk for more than about 30 seconds without going into a coughing fit. So just had to work on some other projects and rest and try to get well. So I'm back. Today we're going to talk about why am I messing with these cheap China hi-fi products. Obviously it feels like it makes more sense working on some of the higher end stuff that, if you spend $1,000, $1,200, $1,500 for some sort of hi-fi product, it's nice to know if you're getting what you're paying for, how does it perform, is it fixable, and so far I've been able to bring them up to pretty good performance standards with a minimal amount of parts without having to really go in and replace everything and work within the constraints of the parts they come with, at least the major parts. Now we start talking about this 6P1. I got so frustrated with this thing a couple days ago, I wanted to just throw it out the window. It's such a hodgepodge of mismatched, weird stuff that just makes no sense. Trying to make this thing do anything close to what it's advertised at is proving to be impossible, or at least for me. And maybe there's someone out there that can figure out kind of the magic sauce to make this thing sing. I'm just not finding it. The first mod that I did to this thing, and I'll do a video on this, and probably next week I'll upload this stuff after I decide what I'm going to do with this thing. But the first mod that I did cut the distortion to about 25% of what it came out of the box at. And just so you know, at 1 watt out of the box, this little amp is over 5% distortion, or it's over 4% anyway. I mean, it's off the chain. And you get up near 2 watts and it's 10%. And they're advertising this thing as like 6.8 watts at 1% distortion. It's not anywhere even close to that. And so then I was trying to, decide, okay, let's try maybe running these as pentode tubes without getting into like a crazy, complicated screen supply circuit, with Zener resistors and all that kind of stuff. And again, as soon as it starts making any power, it's now making 4 times the distortion that it did in triode mode, which is crazy. It shouldn't be doing that. So I tried putting some global negative feedback in it to try to tame down the distortion, and then the output transformers just go spastic and all kinds of weird stuff starts happening. And so at this point, I'm looking at this amp going, how did this thing even come into existence? And the only thing that makes sense is somebody came into a constructor and said, hey, I've got a pile of these output transformers and a pile of these 6P1 tubes and a bunch of these 6H8C tubes, and I got a truckload of them. Can we make an amplifier out of it we can sell on Amazon? And somebody took some parts of a guitar amplifier schematic, which is what the front end of this is, and then mixed it with, they probably tried 1 pair of tubes at first and saw it made less than a watt. Said, well, we can't sell that, so let's just double them up. And then they're going, well, then the current's too much for this power transformer. We'll just cut the current in 60% of each tube, and then let's try to get as much as we can out of it and have the transformer on the verge of glowing red. And we're good with that. And that's pretty much what this thing ended up being. And distortion, they're like, whatever, as long as it makes some noise, we'll sell it. And that's what this thing ended up being. And I'm looking at this going, the only thing really usable in this amp is the chassis, maybe the VU meters, and some switches and the tube sockets. And the rest of it's junk. And so, is this thing worth doing something with? I mean, is somebody going to go out and buy this to, quote, mod it when you have to spend $100 more than this thing sells for in parts and basically gut it and rewire the whole thing to make something out of it? And my answer is probably no. And at the end of the day, I feel like it's going to be a waste of these nice EdCore output transformers, because what I would be using are the same output transformers that I could build an EL34 6SQ7 amp out of that I know sounds amazing. I don't think this amp's ever going to sound amazing. It's not going to sound as good as that amp. And these parallel output tubes for single-ended using tiny power ones. I mean, I can understand if somebody wanted to maybe parallel some 300B tubes, to try to get more power out of a single-ended direct heated triode amp. But that's not what this is. I mean, this isn't going to be anything great. And so I honestly feel like I'm just wasting my time, because I really doubt there's very few people that would end up doing that, keeping this a single-ended amp. Now, what I'm thinking about doing, since I'm going to have to replace all the wiring inside of it and all the iron anyway, of go ahead with the push-pull design. So I got some 7K output transformers that I got off eBay. I'll share more info about that later, that I'm excited to try. And then we could either go with these 6P1s, or we could go with the EL84s and build something like that simple push-pull amp in this chassis. But may end up going ahead and using these 6P1s just to kind of keep it different. And I've got some of these tubes that I could use. And then we may end up using some 6SL7s or some other driver tube. I'm not sure. Or phase splitter. And we may have to add a tube. I don't know. But I feel like that's a better use of my time. And I'm kind of getting to the point of I've got so many projects that I want to do that I just cannot get bogged down in stuff like this. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to wire this thing up with my front end mods. And this is actually a viewer's amp that he sent to me. So I'm going to wire this thing up with the front end mods that I know work, and then put some resistors on the heaters so this thing can work natively on 120 volts, so you don't need a bucking transformer. And it'll also boost up the B+, which should help it make a little more power. And then just call this a day as far as, like, if you want to try to make this thing as good as it can be, this is kind of it. And I think that's fair. And so, if you're the viewer that sent me this, honestly, it's been so long. I apologize. Send me an email and, we'll figure out how to ship this thing back to you. Sorry we couldn't turn this thing into a beautiful, 6.5 watt single-ended amp, but that's just not in the cards, and that's not going to happen. And I need to be careful about diving into more of these really junky low-end projects when I've got so many cool things that I want to build. Like, I want to build that 2A3 amp. I think that's going to be really nice. I've also got some 5B 255M power tubes that I want to build a high-powered push-pull amp out of that runs in pure pentode mode. That's going to be a very different thing, because most of the stuff people are buying and listening to are ultralinear. A pure pentode mode amp would be something pretty unique that I think it does have a really different sound to it that's real authoritative, probably works real good with rock and roll, and would be a cool project. But I'm stuck working on this junk. So let me know in the comments what you think. Should we get back to doing some really cool kind of scratch build DIY stuff and get away from this really junky stuff? I mean, the R8 was a good project, and I don't think that was a waste of time at all. And somebody may be sending me an R300, which is the 300B version of one of their amps, which probably, again, is one worth diving into. But I can't keep wasting time on this really junky stuff that's on the low end that they're not worth investing any money in. So anyway, sorry for the rant about that, but I was just been, like I said, I was ready to just throw this thing out the window the other day, watching it. Everything I tried to do to it made it worse, which none of it made sense why this thing's misbehaving so bad, other than it's just a total mismatch of junk that is never going to work right. So anyway, I think that'll kind of wrap up today's video. I did get the R8 BOM done. It's on my website. Put the link below. Gonna try to get an R8 final video done today as well, which hopefully I'll be posting soon. If you're enjoying this content, please subscribe. Please like the video. We'll see you next week for the Monday Monologue.